Praise God. What a beautiful morning. And we're going to get into the Word. We're going to study and grow. And first, we're going to do a little bit of a review. We've been talking about healing. And healing is just so important in the body of Christ. It's something that's been provided for us. A lot of times you look at, okay, Jesus paid for the sin of the world. But healing, I don't know. Maybe when we get to heaven, that'll be our healing. That's what a lot of people believe. But no, at the same exact time that Jesus paid for the sin of the world, he paid for the healing of the world. Not everyone receives forgiveness of sins. A lot of people won't receive Jesus, and a lot of people don't receive healing. But he paid for everyone's sin and everyone's healing. So we don't have to go through life as believers with a covenant. We don't have to go through life dealing with sickness. And one thing I did want to point out is that I don't come down on people if they are struggling with sickness. There are certain things I'm struggling with right now, and you guys probably hear this a lot, but with my tooth, I am believing that I am going to have a new tooth. I believe that. If Jesus can raise the dead, if he holds atoms together, why can't I have a new tooth? Okay, so I'm believing that. Some people may think, well, that's pretty crazy. You're maybe out of your mind a little bit. Yeah, I am out of my natural mind. I'm believing for this new tooth, but it does bother me. I do struggle with it. I'm not saying I've mastered healing and I'm just, so up here. No, I'm not. We're in this together. There are things we got to learn, things we've got to dig into. So that's one of my main points is I don't want anyone to think that I'm Mr. Healing and I have it all figured out. I do not, but we can grow together in it. So one of the main things we've been talking about is Jesus' healing, the times that he healed. And a very interesting one we went over was in John chapter 5, the lame man at the pool of Bethesda. So we're going to do a review on that. And just a lot of interesting things. I won't be able to hit every point that we went over, but it starts in John chapter 5, verse 2. We're going to start. It says, "Now there was in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water." Verse 4. "For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water, and whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had." So this healing was totally based on their efforts, correct? We can see that. Whoever got in there first was healed. Okay, it was totally based on what they could do. They had to do their part, so to speak. Something physically. They had to do something physical. They had to get into the pool. So now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. Now I'm going to go back up here to verse 4. It says they were waiting. Okay? They were, verse 3, it says, sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. And that's a big Old Testament principle, is waiting on God. And I do believe that there's things under the New Testament, the New Covenant, we wait on God for. We're waiting on his return, correct? We're waiting on certain things. But however, healing, we do not have to wait on God anymore. There's certain things in the New Covenant that we do not wait on God for. He's waiting on us. He's given us the ability to heal. He's given us the power. Remember, a couple weeks ago we went over in Acts chapter 3 where Peter says, "What I have, I give to you in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Rise up and walk." Notice Peter said, "What I have, I presently have possession of. I give, I release, I impart to you." So we do not wait on God. Right here, the pool of Bethesda, they were waiting for healing. Correct? They're waiting for the stirring of the waters. Now under the new covenant, under grace, we don't wait on God for healing. He's given us the ability. So, big difference there. So now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. That is a long, long time to have something. And a lot of times when we struggle with sickness, it becomes a part of us. We actually will identify with that sickness. I've heard people say, well, they'll talk about, like we talked about last week, alcoholism. People identify. They'll say, "I'm an alcoholic." Even though they maybe haven't touched a drink for 20 years, they identify with their problem. They make it their identity. Well, if you're a born-again believer, you have a new identity. Your identity is in Christ. Okay? So having a sickness for that long, a lot of times people will identify with their sickness. It'll become a part of them. They'll become used to it. It's almost like a friend to some people. You know what I mean? I've had a buddy who dealt with cerebral palsy for years. I mean, he was born with cerebral palsy, and he walked around with crutches and everything, and it was part of his life. It was just what he identified with. But then he got a hold of healing. He got a hold of things like that, and just miracles happened. It was awesome. I mean, he still walks with crutches, but he's doing so much better. He can actually walk somewhat without them now, and he's improving. But so we went over that. Then verse 6, and when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" Very, very simple question. Do you want to be made well? Okay, and then verse 7, the sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I am coming, another steps down before me." So Jesus asked him a question, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be made well? And the man didn't say yes or no. He didn't say, "Yes, I want to be made well," or "No, I really don't." He gave a reason why he wasn't healed. And see, that's what a lot of people will do. You ask them, do you want to be healed? They'll say, "Yeah, but I'm not in my Bible enough. Yeah, but I don't have enough faith. Yeah, but I don't come to church enough. Yeah, but I sinned last week. Yeah." See, the focus is on them. See, the focus should be on Jesus and what he's done. That's what releases healing, because it's not dependent on you. It isn't. Healing is not dependent on you. If healing was dependent on you, like the person who had to jump in the pool first, only one person would get healed, and no one would be experiencing healing. But praise God, healing is not dependent on you. It's dependent on what Jesus has done, the finished work of the cross, just like salvation. The forgiveness of sins is not dependent on you. It's dependent on what Jesus has done. So, the man began to give an excuse of why he isn't healed. He began to point out why he wasn't experiencing healing. See, we shouldn't be doing that. If you want to be made well, don't even, okay, why am I not healed? Okay, this. And I'm not saying that there may be things that are hindering, like unbelief, things like that, but that's not our first focus. Our first focus is Jesus, and then we can look at, okay, I need to maybe get into the Word more, maybe meditate on the Word more. But our first focus is Jesus. Okay? So, think about why you should be healed, not why you shouldn't be healed. This man was thinking why he wasn't healed. So, and then verse 8, Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." Notice, we talked about this. Notice how easy that was. And we talked about how I very rarely, if any times, I've ever heard anyone pray like this for sickness. Normally it's a long, long prayer of kind of begging. "Oh God, please, if it be your will, please heal this person. We thank you." We say a lot of things. We think kind of the more we talk, the more maybe God will hear us. And that's always been my take on it. I just naturally would do it. It was very unnatural when the Lord told me to start praying this way. Only a few words, like Jesus. Jesus said, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." He didn't get into this long, drawn-out prayer. And you notice this is something he does every time he heals. It isn't this long, long thing of begging and pleading. Why? Because we talked about less is more in the Spirit. Okay, less work of the flesh, it allows the free flow of the Spirit. Okay, that's backwards to us, because we grow up, we see the world. The harder you work at something, the more you're going to accomplish, right? That's very obvious in the natural realm. However, in the Spirit, for us, it's already been provided. So when you actually try to do physical work for it, when you try to earn it, you actually block it. You actually will block the freedom of God. So Jesus, and then even Peter in Acts chapter 3, they just prayed very simply. Because it's not their flesh that is healing people. It's not their flesh that is doing it. It's the Spirit that's doing it. The Spirit, it's nothing for the Spirit. Healing it's not a big effort. God, the Holy Spirit's not like, what's the effort for him is getting us to believe, because he can't mess with our free will. So, Jesus made it very, very simple. "Rise, take up your bed and walk." That is so simple. Verse 9, "And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked. And that day was a Sabbath." So then we talked about, did Jesus intentionally, because if you go down, verse 10, "Then the Jews therefore said to him who was cured, 'It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed.'" So did Jesus intentionally tell this man to break the law? If Jesus came to fulfill the law, So if he's telling people to break the law, then he would be a lawbreaker, wouldn't he? So he told him, Jesus knew it was the Sabbath. It wasn't like, oh, wow, I forgot it was a Sabbath. He knew it was a Sabbath because he is the Lord of the Sabbath. And he knew what he was saying when he said, take up your bed. He could have just said, hey, walk. Go walk around. Leave your bed because it's the Sabbath and we don't want to break the law. But he said specifically, it's the first thing he told him to do. Take up your bed and walk. So Jesus was telling him to break their law, their tradition. See, in the Levitical and Mosaic law, there were certain things you shouldn't do on the Sabbath. But I do not recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, if I'm wrong on this, I am open to correction. I do not believe, through my study of the Levitical and the Mosaic law, that it was against it to take up a bed and walk on the Sabbath. Does anyone, if come to me after if you have any dispute on that, but I don't think there was. So Jesus was intentionally telling him to break their tradition. And here's what the Lord really showed me. In order to walk in the freedom of God, we need to break off religious traditions of men. See, it's the religious traditions of men that hinder us from walking in the freedom and liberty that God has provided. Why do men set up religious traditions and things like that? Because they understand them. They're easily understood. Grace isn't very easily understood because grace is understood with the heart. Law and demands and traditions are understood with the mind. The mind. That's in the simplest way of putting it. That's why people develop all these traditions. And the Pharisees loved doing this. Jesus even talked about it and rebuked them for it. They loved doing this, making up rules like this, so they can lord it over people, so they can have power over people. They can be the judge. And this was the number one thing Jesus was against, was this religious tradition mindset. Okay? So, we must break the religious traditions of men to walk in the freedom of God. One of those religious traditions might be, you need to beg God. You need to really beg Him for healing. I've done that. I've done that for years. Beg God. I thought the more pathetic I looked, the more He would be like, okay, all right, I'll give it to you. Jeez, stop bothering me. That's kind of that's what I thought. That's really what I thought. Thought I really had to plead and beg. And so it wasn't until I threw off that religious tradition, because I learned it. I learned it from other believers. I learned it. I didn't gather it from my own conclusion from the Word. I learned it from mix, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is mixing the covenants. I mixed the covenants. There was a lot of begging in the Old Testament, a lot of pleading, and hopefully God won't strike us, that kind of thing. But when I threw off that religious tradition of I do not have to beg God, I'm not a beggar, I have been freely given healing, that's when I walked in the healing power of God. Started seeing miracles in my body and other people's bodies, and other people started seeing miracles around me. So that's what the Lord really spoke to me, and that was our review for John chapter 5. Just awesome things in there. The pool of Bethesda. There's so much more in there that I wasn't able to go over, and we'll probably go over that again in the future. But today, what we're going to talk about is something that is very, very. This is relevant in the vast majority of churches around the world. Something that I've done for years, something that I've been a part of for years, and it's called mixing the covenants. How many of you know that there is an old covenant and a new covenant? How many of you know that? All right, praise God. There's an old covenant and a new covenant. There's many covenants in the Bible. Very interesting study. And I when I started studying covenants, I just was shocked at how much I don't know about covenants. I was amazed. There's just so much about covenants and things like that. But we're just really going to hit the basics here. There's many covenants. I believe the first covenant, the first actual, when it actually says covenant, is with Noah. When God flooded the earth and everything, and then he's made a covenant that He will not flood the earth any longer. Made a covenant with mankind, basically. There's the Abrahamic covenant, the promise of righteousness by faith, and that Abraham's seed will be more numerous than the stars of the sky. Then we know of the Mosaic and the Levitical covenant, and that's what we know of as the Old Covenant. And there's the New Covenant. So, first we're just going to define what a covenant is. And this is a basic definition. There is quite a few definitions of covenant. It is a binding agreement or compact between two or more parties. In legal terms, it is a formal sealed agreement or contract. Okay, so we talked about how there's the old covenant and the new covenant, and a lot of times people mix these, and I got to thinking, why do people mix the covenants? Okay, the new covenant started with Jesus, his ministry on earth, and then with his death and resurrection. Okay, that started the new covenant. It's the covenant in his blood. There's the old covenant. Why do people mix them? That was kind of my question. And I think it's very simple. There may be all kinds of reasons, but I think it's very, very simple, the reason why. Because it's all the Bible, right? You've got the Old Testament in here and the New Testament. So whenever you read something in here, if you read something in the Old Testament, and if you don't know the separation of covenants, you're going to think that, for example, I'm going to give an example. Sodom and Gomorrah. They were deep in sin, correct? I mean, just deep in sin. And God poured judgment and wrath out on those two cities. That was under the Old Testament. But it was before even the Old Covenant. But it was under the Old Testament. There was no atonement for sin. So someone reads Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis, and they say, wow, God punishes cities that have sin. Therefore, doesn't New Orleans have sin? Doesn't San Francisco have sin? Therefore, God is He's going to judge them and punish them. That's what he did to Sodom and Gomorrah. He's going to do it to San Francisco, right? See, what the person did, and I did that. I used to teach, I used to actually teach, if God's going to punish these cities because he did it to Sodom and Gomorrah, and I've heard it taught too, that it's just, he wants to do these things. It's really, I don't know, I heard it, so I would then again teach it like in the jails and prisons and things like that. What that person's doing is they're reading it from the Old Testament, and they're not seeing it through the lens of the cross, what has already taken place. See, God does punish sin. He is just. He does have wrath for sin. However, in this age we're living in, he poured out his wrath and judgment on Jesus. We've went over that quite a bit. He's not going to judge San Francisco yet, okay? Yet, or New Orleans yet. Not today. This is called the dispensation of grace. So people will read in Genesis, God poured out his wrath on Sodom and Gomorrah, therefore he has to do it to New York City and New Orleans and all this. But they're totally mixing the testaments. They're totally not seeing that God already punished sin in Christ. He doesn't have wrath for sin right now. Now, however, when the church is taken up, and Jesus comes back, that's it, okay? The wrath of God, like the earth has never seen, will be poured out on sin, okay? For people who did not receive Jesus. So in that case, yes, it's very clear, but not now, not today. Now, when the church is taken up, then I would be proclaiming wrath and judgment on New Orleans and San Francisco and things like that, okay? But not today. So that's just an example. And we're going to go over a few more examples like that. So people mix the covenants. I'm not at all against reading the Old Testament. I read the Old Testament all the time. Okay, but I don't try to live by the law of the Old Testament. See, people read the law and the Old Testament. They try to live by it, and it just doesn't work. We're going to look at where Jesus says you can't put new wine into old wineskins. It just doesn't work. Okay? So, I'm not against reading. Some people say, don't even read the Old Testament. Not at all. I say read it. It is very, very important. Is that Jesus? No, just kidding. Just kidding. I'm not at all against reading the Old Testament, okay? I am not. And people who say that it's wrong to read it, they're wrong. But if you don't know the difference between the Old and New Covenant, I would definitely say start with the New Testament, okay? I always tell new believers, start with the New Testament. Learn about who you are in Christ and your identity before you go and get into the Old Testament, get into the Old Covenant. I learn a lot from the Old Covenant. It's all looking forward to Jesus. It's all looking to the cross, forward to what Jesus is going to do. That's what the Old Testament does. The New Testament is all looking back at what Jesus has already done. The cross is the pinnacle. The cross is a separation point between the Old and the New Testament. Old and New Covenant as well. So, now we must read through, if we're going to read the Old Testament, which we should, we must read through the lens, like the scope of the finished work of the cross and Jesus' ministry on earth. That must be what we view the Old Testament through. So I'm going to give you an example, another example of an example of where someone was taking Old Covenant theology and trying to put it in the New Covenant. In Luke chapter 9, Jesus and the disciples were coming out of Samaria, and they were not receiving Jesus. Okay, they were not receiving. There was a lot of unbelief. So the disciples approached Jesus, and they're like, "Lord, shall we call down fire from heaven on them as Elijah did?" So they were viewing something from the Old Covenant. Elijah did call fire down on people, okay, multiple times. And he was right for doing it. He was just for doing it because he was the man of God. People were coming against him, things like that. God was executing his justice through Elijah. Okay, so the disciples were taking that same mindset of the Old Covenant and coming to Jesus with it and saying, hey, we should call down fire on these unbelievers. They did it in the Old Testament. And here's Jesus' reply in Luke chapter 9 when they asked to call down fire on this particular region. Jesus said, "You know not what spirit you are of. For the Son of Man did not come to take men's lives, but to save them." Does everyone see the difference? Old Covenant, yes, kill them. Send fire down on them. New Covenant, I didn't come to kill them. I came to save them. You know not what spirit. See, that's interesting. It was the spirit of the Old Covenant. And this word spirit's not like Holy Spirit. It's mindset. It's attitude. You know not what spirit, what mindset you are of. I did not come to destroy men's lives. I came to save them. So Jesus, the Old Covenant, why it's dangerous to mix the Old Covenant, because the Old Covenant is not a full picture of God. Now that may be like, what? It's not his full picture. It's called the Bible actually calls it a shadow. Can everyone see my shadow? I can see my shadow. I can see my shadow. It's not me, is it? It's not me. It doesn't have my thoughts. It's portraying me, okay? It's kind of an image of me. The Old Covenant was a shadow of God. It was a shadow of him. And it wasn't a lie or anything. It's perfect. It's perfect. It was a perfect shadow. But it wasn't the full representation of him. Why? Jesus is the full representation of the Father. Jesus said, I can do nothing unless I see my Father doing it. I can say nothing unless I hear my Father saying it. Okay, Jesus even said to Philip, Philip asked Jesus, he's like, Lord, show us the Father, and that should be sufficient with us. And Jesus said, Philip, have I been with you this long and you not recognize me? If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Jesus is the full picture. Okay, even the Old Covenant prophesied the full picture, the fullness of God is going to come. So a lot of people take the shadow of God, thinks that's how God's dealing with people. We need to take what Jesus did and view that. That's how God's dealing with people. Okay, so we look at that as a prime example. The Son of Man did not come to take men's lives, so God's not going to pour on fire on San Francisco right now, or New Orleans, okay, or Detroit. He's not going to do it. Because he didn't come to take their lives. What did he come to do? Save them. Right. Now, like I said, when the church age is over, the church is taken up, then the wrath of God will be poured out on not just one or two cities, the earth, the entire earth, and all those who oppose God. He will defeat them with a double-edged sword out of his mouth. Okay? So, we looked at that, and the Old Testament gives us a glimpse of God. Jesus is the full picture. We haven't even gotten to the verses yet. Uh-oh. We're going to look at Luke 5:36. We're going to go through these pretty quickly. So there's a main verse I want to get to that I would encourage you to study out. Luke 5:36. Then he spoke a parable to them. No one puts a piece from a new garment on an old one. Otherwise, the new makes a tear, and also the piece that was taken out of the new one does not match the old. Jesus is really just breaking it down for us. The old covenant does not match the new covenant. Next verse. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, or else the new wine will burst the wineskins and be spilled, and the wineskins will be ruined. You can't mix the old and the new covenants. You just can't. Next verse. But new wine must be put into new wineskins, and both are preserved. And no one, having drunk old wine, immediately desires new, for he says the old is better. And we see that a lot. People who are under law and under religion, it's hard to give up. It really is. Because when all you know is traditions and things like that, it is difficult. It is difficult. When I first got a hold of grace and the new covenant and not mixing the covenants, it was a shocker for me. But I was so miserable trying to perform in my own works and not looking at the finished work of the cross. I was so miserable that I embraced it very well. But a lot of times when you're just focused on do's and don'ts and things like that, it will be very difficult to give up. Anyway, Hebrews 8:6 is the main verse I really wanted to go over, and we only have a few minutes. I think probably we'll go over a lot of it next week too. But this just really says it all, what we're talking about today. It really says it all. But now this is talking about Jesus, now he has obtained a more excellent ministry. Okay, in Hebrews 8 it was talking about the ministry of the priests and things like that. And this is talking about Jesus' priestly ministry. He has obtained a more excellent ministry inasmuch as he is also a mediator of a better, that's the key word right there, better covenant, which was established on better promises. Notice he says a mediator. The old covenant had two parties. There was two parties involved. There was God and imperfect man. There was two parties in that covenant. Imperfect man blew it. He could not fulfill the covenant. God was able to fulfill his part of the covenant. He blessed them when they were good and cursed them when they were bad. He fulfilled his part, but man couldn't. He couldn't live up to the standard, the perfect standard. The old covenant had two parties. The new covenant has three parties. Three people, three parties. God, Jesus, and man. Okay, because it says right here, he's the mediator of a covenant. There's three parties. Jesus became a perfect man, fulfilled the old covenant, and established, he died. That's important. He died and then rose again to establish a new covenant. And this new covenant is not based on us. It's based on him. I like to look at it like this. It's not that God, when someone gets saved, it's not that God individually makes a covenant with them or that person makes a covenant with God. God has a covenant with Jesus right now. It's a perfect covenant. It's called the eternal covenant in his blood. In Hebrews, I believe it's either in 9 or 10. A perfect, our eternal covenant. God made a covenant with Jesus. And when we get saved, we enter into that covenant. See, this way, no one can blow the covenant. I've said it many times. Jesus isn't going to mess this covenant up. He isn't. He's the perfect man. He's the God man. He's God. He's not going to screw it up like man did in the old covenant. So when we receive Jesus, we enter into that covenant. So that's an awesome deal. That's an awesome deal. We get all of his benefits. Everything that he earned, we get. What does he get in return? He gets us. What he longs for, what he desires. His heart. His prized possession. Us. The apple of his eye. Us. It's just amazing what God did. And I mean, everything that he had to, all the laws and the different things in order to be just and right. To think that he did this for us, basically became a man and established a covenant with himself, and then we can enter into that covenant. It says he's the mediator of a better covenant. I'm not saying we don't have a covenant with God or things like that, but I'm saying Jesus is mediating between us and God right now, this new covenant. Praise God for that, because if it was just us and God, we would blow it. We really would. It says if you're guilty in one point of the law, you're guilty of breaking the whole thing. All of it. Okay, all of it. So, I think we're going to continue this, looking at the old covenant, new covenant, not mixing covenants, because there's so much. I think today we just kind of established what new covenant, what exactly they are. But we're gonna talk about how people mix the covenants, and I think one of the things that people fellowship with God, people have mixed the covenants. They also don't see God. They see God as out in heaven or somewhere else. The new covenant, He's in you. We've talked about that a lot. That's another thing people do. They mix the covenants, talking about God, please coming, and things like that. The old covenant is instruction on what not to do. Essentially, there are promises and things like that. But essentially, the old covenant, the law, is all about what not to do. The new covenant is empowerment on what you can do. See, the old covenant is all about just basically instruction, written instruction. It's in the instructions on how to drive a car, basically. That's all it is. It's not the car, but the new covenant is the car. That's kind of like the difference. You have the old covenant's like a manual. Here's how you drive it. Here's what it entails, But the new covenant, you actually get to drive the car. You're actually empowered to live this life. You're empowered to do what the law could not empower you to do. There's a lot of differences, and just probably very quickly I'm going to go over this difference. Hebrews 10:16. I don't have that on the board, but Hebrews 10:16. Now, I may have gone over this before, but it definitely bears repeating. One day I was studying out the 10 Commandments, and for some reason I've always just thought that the two great commandments, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself, I always thought that those were in the 10 Commandments. I just assumed. But they're not. Those two commandments are not in the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments were written on stone. Okay? Those two commandments were given by the Word. They were given in the Old Covenant, but they were given by the Word. Now, these two commandments remain in the New Covenant. Okay? All the law and all the prophets hang on these two commandments. So I got to thinking, why wouldn't God write these two commandments on stone, the commandments of love? Why wouldn't He write them on stone? Because Hebrews 10:16 says, "This is the covenant that I will make with them after those days, says the Lord. I will put my laws into their hearts, and in their minds I will write them." See, He didn't want to write the laws of love, the commands of love, on stone. He wanted to write them on your hearts, on your minds. See, that's another major difference between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. Now love is written in your heart, in your mind. Love is in you now. The love of God, love Himself, the one who calls Himself love, is in you as a believer. So that's the difference between the Old Covenant and New Covenant. A lot of different things. So I would encourage you to we're going to look at some major things in the Old Covenant and the New Covenant that people mix. They mix together. A lot of people think, yeah, Jesus paid for your sin, but once you're saved, you got to stop sinning. You got to stop it. And that stop it mentality actually puts people in bondage to sin more or to be in fear. When you actually teach people who they are in Christ and that they're a new creation and that God has already made them righteous, that's what empowers them to stop sinning. Okay? See, that's another thing people mix covenants with. They mix covenant with all kind. I mean, it's amazing, and we're going to go over those things. But like I've been mentioning before, if you want to come up for prayer afterwards, after the offering and everything, please do. I mean, we'd be more than happy to pray for you. Anyone, I mean, even if you want to go to Doyle, Nina, I mean, even Chris has volunteered to pray with people. I mean, we would be blessed. It blesses us because we're able to agree with you and see the power of God manifest. We've been seeing the power of God. John's back got healed last week. He was having back pain. And he came up there believing. It's like, you know what? I'm going to get healed. We prayed, very simple prayer. It wasn't us. It wasn't our ability. It wasn't our power. It was Jesus. We just focused on what He did. And he was healed. And we're going to experience that more and more and more because we're going to take advantage of what Jesus provided for us. We're not going to be scared. We're not going to be ashamed either. We're not going to be ashamed of what He's done for us. We're not going to shrink away from what He's done for us. We're going to embrace it together. We're going to learn that as a family. So I encourage you to come up for prayer. If you have anything, if you want to pray for somebody, I know we're going to pray for Aaron, right? Erica, that's right. We're going to pray for her as we close. And please just come up for prayer. So let's go ahead and close.